Just in case any of us were lulled into a false sense of security this week after seeing the President of the United States visiting the Middle East and behaving mostly like a normal president would, speaking graciously to his hosts, promoting American interests abroad, that kind of thing. Well, the very next day, the entire administration now seems to be seizing the most wafer-thin of excuses to target and go after former FBI Director James Comey. They want him investigated, arrested, maybe imprisoned. Comey's one of those figures from Trump's first term that he has expressed vengeful sentiments about. Now, so far we'd heard rumblings about how Trump's hand-picked team would be seeking to go after Trump's enemies, but we'd seen little actual action on that front. Then Comey posted this image on his Instagram. Personally, I wouldn't have known any version of what that was supposed to mean, since it's a US-specific cultural reference. But according to the dictionary, the informal North American meaning behind 86, to eject or bar someone from an establishment, such as a restaurant, or to reject, discard, or cancel. There seems to be no consensus online about the origin of this use of the phrase. 3 years ago, it was described as being commonly used in restaurants for when they're out of something, so something's off the menu. In this sense, Comey had come across someone saying that the 47th president should be rejected, thrown out of the establishment, which seems a reasonably mainstream sort of a statement that critical people would make. Indeed, you can still buy merch online for t-shirts and stuff with 8646 on it, which expresses the same sentiment to former President Joe Biden. They are described as a Done with Joe Biden t-shirt, also an Impeached Biden and Fire Biden t-shirt. T-shirts, I'll have you know, that had one sustainability feature, so I expect that was a plus for the target audience. MAGA Republican Matt Gaetz previously tweeted that the party had now 86'd McCarthy, McDaniel and McDonnell. Well, so what, you might be thinking. The United States is, after all, the land of free speech. The current government is a frequent champion and defender of free speech. Indeed, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, has been known once or twice to scold others for not being the same, for doing terrible things like arresting people for posting a tweet. Well, as I said before, political movements are often big on free speech when they're in opposition, and not so much so when they're in government. That is a dynamic you can see in many places, even the ones that are not moving at rapid pace towards authoritarianism. So the Trump administration is saying that this 86th term is obviously and unquestionably actually code for killing somebody, and that therefore the former head of the FBI was actually calling for the assassination of the president. Someone posted the reply by Elon Musk's Grok AI on the subject, after being asked specifically about that definition, and it replied, "In some context, especially in crime fiction, noir, or certain subcultures, 86 has been used to imply killing or taking someone out. This usage is rare and not the primary meaning. It's not a standard or widespread use." Well, you may say that, Grok, but the government disagrees. So, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, posted this. Disgraced former FBI Director James Comey just called for the assassination of President Trump. Department of Homeland Security and Secret Service is investigating this threat and will respond appropriately. Hard to know what sort of investigation that would involve. If you turned it into a script of a crime series, you'd have to think it'd be a pretty dull episode, all things told. Stephen Miller said, Comey's call for assassination while the president is abroad, no less, because I guess it would have been fine if he'd been at home, is a chilling escalation of the war against our democracy by a faction committed to its destruction. Talk about projection. Current FBI Director Kash Patel said, "We are aware of the recent social media post by former FBI Director James Comey, directed at President Trump. We are in communication with the Secret Service," adding that the FBI would give all necessary support. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard posted, "James Comey just issued a call to action to murder the President of the United States." As a former FBI director and someone who spent most of his career prosecuting mobsters and gangsters, he knew exactly what he was doing and must be held accountable under the full force of the law. We fully support the Secret Service investigation into Comey's threat on President Trump's life. Speaker Mike Johnson. President Trump has already survived 2 assassination attempts. Now former disgraced FBI Director James Comey is either threatening to kill Donald Trump or suggesting that someone should. President Trump himself was asked about it by Fox News, and he had this to say.
He knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now, he wasn't very competent, but he was competent enough to know what that meant. And he did it for a reason, and he was hit so hard.
But he wasn't just the headbangers in the most powerful jobs in the country that were on the trail. Just about everybody was out. So, Ted Cruz. Is there any other reasonable explanation for this post, other than that the former head of the FBI is publicly calling for the murder of the president? Arguably, it would be hard to come up with a less reasonable explanation than that. But anyway, Mike Lee, former FBI Director Jim Comey, posted a cryptic message that, as far as I can tell, can be read only to mean kill Trump. I'm speechless, literally speechless, except you weren't speechless, were you? And if it's so cryptic, how come it's so obvious what it means? And then we have Laura Loomer. Well, yes, okay, you would expect the Laura Loomers to be in on this. We can probably move on. But the point is, it seems that the weight of the federal government law enforcement is going to be mobilised on this, which is rather more important. Now, look, maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. I can easily see a world where all the people concerned know full well there's no way they'll be able to make anything of this, really. But what they can do is troll Comey by suggesting they're going to use it to come after him. You know, they'll be saying, "Oh, let's make him really sweat." And in so doing, even if they have no vehicle for taking action this time, they send out a message to all who are high profile, all who'd be inclined to push back on this government, to be careful. Make yourself prominent, we'll put you on the watch list. Once you're on that list, then you only have to give us the faintest whiff of an excuse, and we'll be after you. If people start to internalise that, to believe it, then it has a remarkable chilling effect on opposition. And we know it's already a factor because we already saw Joe Biden preemptively pardoning a bunch of people who were thought to be at risk of a vengeful Trump administration. This is all assuming that they don't actually try to act on these rather hysterical threats. If they did that, then yes, we're into a whole different phase of the process. In a normal America, such a move would be derided, would be thrown out of any court in the land within minutes of arriving there. I think America is a long way still from the point where the government could actually use such a thing and then follow it through into jailing someone. You'll know how far past the line you are the first time that happens. The ironic thing about all of this is that here you have the so-called defenders of free speech going after someone for a social media post. Now, I'm old enough to remember when the Trump administration, with J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, were getting on the UK's case, for example, for supposedly jailing people left, right and centre for posting perfectly innocent memes. Almost as though old ladies posting pictures of their cat were getting pulled in. The most recent cause célèbre, for instance, is the wife of an ex-Conservative councillor, Lucy Connolly. She was arrested and charged after a tweet and jailed for 31 months. Jailed for a tweet. The tweet was sent just as the UK was exploding into a period of dangerous rioting following the murder of innocent children by an attacker in Southport. The riots were aimed at using the tragedy to whip up anti-immigrant and anti-asylum seeker sentiments to the extent where several hotels where asylum seekers were housed were surrounded. One hotel in Tamworth was actually set on fire with people inside. That was the context when Lucy Connolly tweeted, "Set fire to all the bleep hotels full of the bleep for all I care." Now, that is not a vaguely coded shot of some seashells on the beach. That's a pretty explicit call for violence at a time when actual mob violence was in progress. Now, you can argue that 31 months in jail is an excessive sentence. The sentence had been appealed. At the time of shooting this video, the verdict has still not yet been delivered, but was imminent. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was a successful appeal. But this happens. Cases get tried, different judges give more or less severe sentences. At a point of national rioting, you might expect that some judges will be wanting to send out a message to those still on the streets, which would be understandable, but not a great principle for consistency in sentencing. But it's not someone being charged for a simple meme or for expressing a contrary view to that of the government of the day, as the likes of Elon Musk had his millions of followers believing. Mostly, the UK cases of people getting spoken to by police for something they posted online look nothing like that case. There's cases of overzealous local police visiting someone for something that somebody decided might be taken as upsetting. They get generally overruled. Any charges that were brought get dropped. The police end up apologising for overreach. That has happened a number of times. It is stupid. It shouldn't happen. But the fact that such cases don't have real substance to them, they get dropped or thrown out. That is the law, kind of operating as intended. But no speakers, bloggers or YouTubers in the UK walk around feeling worried for their freedom because they expressed an opinion. Yes, we should never take that for granted. But in this case in the United States with James Comey, we're on a different level altogether, because this is not some random police force overzealously interpreting the law until the point where wiser heads then step in and intercede. Here you have the principal officers of the government going in public to say that they cannot conceive that this public statement is anything other than criminal speech. It is exactly the scenario that the First Amendment to the US Constitution is supposed to deal with. The thing is, it's easy to dismiss cases like this as relatively unimportant, because almost certainly they won't act against Comey, and then it will all move on relatively quickly. But when your society is moving from democracy to autocracy, the progress is marked by many such small steps. The gradual chilling of contrary speech, the growing fear and then over time the visible reality that declaring opposition to the government has costs. Cost to your job, cost to your income, cost to your safety, your reputation, and then ultimately costs to your liberty. Once you've reached that point, where speaking out marks you as being brave or stupid by definition, then whether you noticed the moment or not when you passed it, you already lost your democracy. In the meantime, expect the administration to continue to aggressively preach about free speech, and to do that while deporting students who attend protests, turning people back at the border for entry for whatever purposes, and increasingly sending messages to other critics that they had better watch every single thing they say or do, because the first time they slip up, they'll be ready and waiting. Maybe it'll come to be known as doing a Comey.